My path to becoming an SIO in some ways is similar to many others. I started as a faculty member, assistant professor in political science, and I rose up through the ranks to associate professor with tenure. But my route to becoming a senior international officer was a little bit by chance, in that a dean asked me out of the blue if I would be willing to run or manage the international studies program. And I said yes, I would do that, and that was the beginning of my career in administration, and I've enjoyed every moment of it.
I got into the business of international education, I think, in a slightly unusual way. I never intended to be an academic. I never intended to really work at a university. I went and got a doctorate in anthropology because I wanted to do international development work. And when I did this, I spent nearly 20 years living overseas, mostly in Africa and Asia, doing development work. When I came back to the United States, I needed a job. I was qualified to be an academic. I had a PhD, I'd written a book or two and some articles, and so I got hired. But as an assistant professor of anthropology, I began to realize that I would never be able to give my students the chance to have a cross-cultural experience the way I had had one in the Peace Corps and then as a development anthropologist. Not being a professor, I couldn't do that. I might get 2 or 3 of my very best students a year scholarships to go somewhere. So I became an international education administrator. And in that role, I was able to enable large numbers of people to go overseas. I didn't have personal responsibility for that anymore, but that wasn't important to me. What was important was institutionally, these students were being able to go overseas in ways that they couldn't before. So when I finished this career at Purdue a few years ago, we were sending nearly 1,600 students a year overseas on various programs. And that was very, very satisfying for me. So I had a fairly long career working at 3 or 4 big universities and 1 or 2 small ones. Learned a great deal, made a few mistakes, but I'm very, very happy with the career that I've had. It's been great.
So to become an SIO, I think we know that everybody has their own path that they undertake. For me, I was always interested in having that international experience because of my own personal path. But I came to my institution to be a faculty member in German, but at a time when we were beginning to develop and create international programs in a more centralized way. And so I'm one of those SIOs that has had different roles at my institution, but ultimately with how do we help get our graduates prepared for the world, and how do we actually move from decentralized activities to having a plan that moves us forward as an institution.
How did I become a chief international officer or a senior international officer? Well, I had been just a faculty member teaching Latin American studies, and the university where I was the University of New Mexico, and they wanted to start a Latin American Institute, and I chaired the search committee, and we made 4 offers and everybody turned the job down. So the president said to me, I want you to run it yourself. So I became the founding director of the new institute, and I was in a sense a senior international officer, but with a very limited portfolio, which was Latin America, not the whole world. And that was in 1980, I became the director, and 20 years later, my wife and I decided to go in the job market, and one of the places that we looked at was Duke, and Duke hired both of us, and they brought me in not to do Latin America, but to do the whole world. So that's when I became the vice provost for international affairs. And then I had not only studies of the whole world, but study abroad, service learning, visiting scholars, agreements with other institutions, a whole series of other activities became part of that portfolio, which was very stimulating, very challenging, a lot of fun.